A very warm greetings to the Y11s again. We are going to be looking at worksheet 7 this time. It is based on strand 4 graphs and we will be looking at quadratic functions. Okay, so by the end of this worksheet discussion, students should be able to draw quadratic graphs of the form of y is equals to ax squared. Okay, so we are just basically looking at general graphs. These types of equations are very important. They usually come in multiple choice sections of the paper. Now looking at this one, quadratic functions are parabolas. The name of that graph is parabola. Some observations for you to note: if the coefficient of x squared gets larger, the parabola becomes thinner or narrower, closer to its line of symmetry. Okay, so we can also have a look at refer to the graphs that is drawn here. This green graph is referring to an equation where the coefficient is more than 1. Okay, so if you look at and compare the green, blue and the red graphs, the narrowest is the green one. Okay, so the larger the coefficient, the narrower the graph. If the coefficient of x squared gets smaller, the parabola becomes thicker or wider, okay, further from its line of symmetry. This is the red one we are talking about. The coefficient is less than 1. So if the coefficient is less than 1, then this is the wider graph. Okay, so the smaller coefficient we have, the wider the graph becomes. The blue one is our original graph of y is equals to x squared, whereby the coefficient of x squared is just a 1. The last part says if the coefficient of x squared is negative, the parabola opens downwards, or basically the U shape that we initially had has become a N shape, right? It again follows a similar law of its whether it is wide or narrow. Okay, so if it is a bigger value of the coefficient, then it is narrow graph. A smaller value of the coefficient, it is a wider graph. Looking further, example says when sketching the graph of the form of y is equals to ax squared using the table of the values, that is the most useful method. Table of values can be used to sketch any graph, whether it is a parabola or any other form of graph that you will be learning later. Okay, you can also use this table method if you are having difficulties when using any other method. You will be awarded full marks all the time. The question says sketch the graph of the quadratic function f of x is equals to x squared, and the method of solving: select some positive and negative values for x and substitute in the formula. Okay, whenever we are using the table of values, we always need to ensure that we pick some negative and some positive x values, right? Compute the y values by using the calculator. Note when substituting the negative values, use brackets. If you don't use a bracket, as you can see in this case, you don't use brackets, you will end up with a -4. The use of brackets is very important. Okay, so bracket -2 whole thing squared is equals to 4, and we do the same method of working for all the other x values. Okay, so taking one x value at a time, putting it in place of x in the function and finding the corresponding y value. So once we get our corresponding y values, this becomes our pair of coordinates. -2, 4 is the first pair of coordinates. So I'm going to plot that. -2 on the x, 4 on the y-axis. So this is where they fall. -2, 4. Right, that is my first coordinate. The second one is -1, 1. So -1 on the x-axis, 1 on the y-axis. -1, 1, this is a coordinate. The next one is 0, 0. 0, 0 is at the origin. And likewise, we plot all the other points. After we have plotted the points, we are going to finish it with a graph. Knowing that this is going to be a quadratic function, it is going to have either a U shape or a N shape. a lot of students usually make this error and they end up drawing a V-shaped graph. You have to be very accurate. The only time when this error occurs is when you don't have the proper graduations in the y-axis. Okay, even though we are not using 2 and 3 when plotting the points, but it has to be shown in the y-axis, and the distance between every next point has to be same. Okay, the graduation distance or the intervals on the axis has to be equal. If you don't have them equal, the shape of the graph won't be there. So once we have plotted all the points, this is going to be a U shape. We are just going to put up a U which crosses all the 5 points that we have found and arrows at both ends. And that is done with our first graph. Having a look at example 2. Example 2 is sketch the graph of the quadratic function y is equals to 2x squared. This is a similar type of equation and a similar working is also required. So we are picking numbers from -2 to +2, -2, -1, 0, 1 and 2, putting it in place of x, 2 open bracket, -2 close squared. We should get an 8. And likewise we do all the rest, and these are our y values. They represent coordinates, and then we plot them on the Cartesian plane. Now if you look at this y-axis, all the values are being listed from 0 to 8. 0 to 8, all the values are there. We are not missing out on any value. If you miss out values, your shape of the graph won't be accurate. Okay, so after we have plotted the 5 points, we can fit in a U shape to complete the graph. Okay, I've also got an example here for a negative graph. Y is equals to -half x squared. Okay, this one, a similar method of working is required. We have picked points from -3 this time, x values of -3 up till +3. So there is a total of 7 value calculations that is required. This is a proper table, a complete table, which even shows all the working. There is a negative sign in front. Then we put -3 in brackets. The value for x is -3. So we end up with a double minus sign, right? This minus sign is from the equation, and this minus sign belongs to 3. So it is minus -3 squared. -3 squared is 9, with a minus in front makes it a -9. And likewise we do the calculation for all the other x values to find our corresponding y values. And these x and y, they represents our pair of coordinates. So once we have found them, the last thing to be done is plotting them on a Cartesian plane. Okay, and this Cartesian plane doesn't show numbers, but they are important. Okay, you need to put numbers. Okay, even though it can be counted in this particular grid diagram, but it is still important, right? So once we put the numbers, it is a negative graph. We end up with an N shape. Thank you everyone. You can attempt the exercise question thereafter.